All right, so today we're going to dive into some really powerful stuff, and it all starts with a story that honestly is kind of intense.
Oh yeah, definitely intense.
This is about James Clear and his book, Atomic Habits.
Hmm.
But before we even get into the book itself, his personal story is really where it all begins. You think about like facing the absolute worst thing imaginable. And for him, it was a really, really serious accident.
Yeah.
We're talking coma, struggling to breathe. Even his eye was bulging out of his head.
Wow, yeah, it sounds absolutely terrifying.
It was terrifying just reading about it. And then on top of all that, after surviving that whole ordeal, his dream of becoming a pro baseball player was totally shattered.
It's like his whole world just completely changed.
It did. And it was in that process of rebuilding his life from the ground up that he started to explore these ideas about habits and how they shape us.
That's what's so fascinating about these kinds of really difficult experiences. They force you to reevaluate everything.
Totally. And that brings us to what we're diving into today for you. We're going straight to the heart of atomic habits
Hmm.
and really pulling out those core principles that you can apply in your own life.
Yeah, we want to give you the shortcut to understanding how even those tiny, almost invisible habits can lead to some really big results.
Exactly. So no matter where you're starting from today, this is about understanding the power of small changes.
And I think a big part of that is recognizing that real transformation rarely happens in these huge leaps. It's the accumulation of those consistent small efforts.
So let's start with one of the most fundamental concepts in the book, the power of compounding habits. Some people call it the aggregation of marginal gains.
It sounds a little bit complicated, but the idea itself is actually super simple.
It is.
Yeah,
And
I saw
a
it.
great example of this is British cycling.
Hmm?
Back in the day, they weren't exactly known for being dominant in the sport.
Yeah, they weren't winning a whole lot.
But then Dave Brailsford comes in, and his whole strategy was about finding these tiny 1% improvements in every single thing they did.
Like everything from the aerodynamics of their bikes to how the athletes were sleeping.
It's crazy, and the results speak for themselves. In just 10 years, they went from being pretty average to winning tons of world championships, Olympic and Paralympic gold medals, and Tour de France victories.
Yeah, they became a total powerhouse just from stacking all these small advantages.
And that's exactly what we want you to see here. These 1% improvements, they add up over time, they compound, and they can lead to huge changes in your life.
It's like the principle of compound interest with money. You start small, but those gains keep building on each other.
Exactly. And it's not just about these massive achievements. Think about your everyday life. Like if you commit to learning just one new thing every single day.
Or being just a little bit more organized with your time, or even just being a little bit more patient in your conversations with people.
All of those seemingly small things, they create a completely different trajectory over time.
It's about making those small positive changes consistently.
Now, Clear also talks about how it can be really hard to stick with these habits at first, especially when you're not seeing immediate results. He calls this the valley of disappointment.
Yeah, because often we expect to see progress in a straight line.
Right. And when we don't see that, we get discouraged.
And that's when a lot of people give up.
But Clear explains that even though you might not see those changes on the surface, there's actually a lot happening beneath the surface. It's like heating up an ice cube.
Hmm.
You can heat it up from, let's say, 25 degrees to 31 degrees.
And you don't see anything happening. You don't see any melting.
Exactly. It looks the same,
Mhm.
but all that energy is being stored up.
And then as soon as you hit 32 degrees, boom, it starts melting.
That's the plateau of latent potential. All that work you put in starts paying off.
So you really got to trust the process and stick with it.
So many of those overnight successes we hear about are actually the result of years of consistent effort behind the scenes.
It's work that was done when it felt like nothing was happening.
Exactly. So now that we understand the power of these small habits, how do we actually build them and make them stick?
And this is where Clear introduces this really interesting idea of focusing on systems instead of just goals.
Right. For so long, we've been told that goals are the key to success. Set those SMART goals and you'll achieve anything.
But Clear points out that goals actually have some limitations.
And some of them are kind of surprising.
Yeah, like one thing is that achieving a goal only creates a temporary change.
So you might hit your goal of losing weight, for example.
But if you don't change the habits that led to the weight gain in the first place, the weight's probably going to come back.
Exactly. So it's about addressing the root cause. It's about fixing the system.
And another thing is that goals can actually limit your happiness in a way.
It's because you're constantly focused on reaching some future point instead of being present in the moment.
Right, you're always striving for something that's not here yet.
And Clear says that a systems-first approach flips that around.
When you focus on the process and you actually enjoy those daily habits, you can be happy anytime you're doing them.
It's about finding joy in the journey, not just the destination.
And lastly, goals can actually hinder long-term progress because they create this yo-yo effect.
Like those athletes who train super hard for a competition
And then they completely stop once it's over.
because they don't have that goal anymore.
Exactly. They haven't built a system that supports those habits long-term.
So if goals aren't the answer, what should we focus on instead?
Well, Clear introduces this powerful concept of identity-based habits.
And this is about shifting your focus from what you want to achieve to who you want to become
It's about saying, okay, what kind of person do I want to be?
instead of just what do I want to accomplish.
And your habits then become a way to reinforce and demonstrate that identity.
He gives this really relatable example of Brian Clark, who had this lifelong habit of biting his fingernails.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
He had tried to stop using willpower, but never really worked.
Until he decided to get his first ever manicure,
And that act wasn't just about having nice nails.
it was about becoming someone who takes care of himself, someone who values good grooming.
Exactly. It was a tangible step in becoming that person.
And the more pride you take in a specific aspect of your identity, the more motivated you'll be to maintain the habits that are consistent with that identity.
It's like you're protecting that self-image.
Right. And with every action you take, every habit you do, you're basically casting a vote for the kind of person you want to be.
And you don't have to be perfect every single time.
You just have to win the majority of those votes.
It's the accumulation of those small identity-reinforcing behaviors that really shape who you are.
So now that we understand this idea of identity-based habits, how do we actually put it into practice?
Well, that's where Clear's 4 laws of behavior change come in.
They give us a really practical framework for building good habits and breaking bad ones.
Exactly. So let's start with the first law. Make it obvious. This is all about the cue, the trigger that starts a habit.
And Clear explains this through what he calls the habit loop, which goes cue, craving, response, reward.
And it all starts with that cue. So to make good habits obvious, you first have to become aware of your existing habits, both the good and the bad.
Right, because we often do things on autopilot without even realizing it.
Exactly. So Clear suggests creating a habit scorecard where you literally list out all your habits.
So you can see them clearly.
And then once you're aware of your habits, you can start to design the cues for the behaviors you want to adopt.
It's about being intentional with your environment.
And one really effective way to do that is using implementation intentions, which is basically pre-deciding exactly what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, and where you're going to do it.
It removes all the guesswork.
The formula is, I will behavior at time and location.
So for example, I will meditate for 10 minutes at 7 a.m. in my living room.
Exactly. And Clear says that people are often more motivated to start new habits at the beginning of a week, month, or year.
Maybe because we feel like we're getting a fresh start.
Another technique you can use is habit stacking, which is basically attaching a new habit to an existing one.
So you're using an existing routine as the trigger for the new behavior.
The formula is, after current habit, I will new habit.
For example, after I brush my teeth, I will floss.
And it's important to choose a cue that's really specific and happens reliably every time.
Don't be vague. Be as clear as possible.
Clear also mentions this interesting thing called the Diderot effect.
What's that?
It's basically how buying one new thing often leads to buying a bunch of other related things.
Oh yeah, like when you get a new dress and then you have to get new shoes and a new purse to match.
Exactly. And it shows how one cue can trigger a whole cascade of behaviors.
And our environment plays a huge role in making cues obvious.
Absolutely. Clear talks about this study done at a hospital cafeteria where they simply made water bottles more visible and accessible.
And people started drinking way more water.
Without even realizing it, they were just responding to their environment.
So we can actually design our environment to make good habits easier and bad habits harder.
Exactly. We can be the architects of our surroundings.
Like putting your workout clothes right next to your bed.
Or hiding the junk food in the back of the pantry.
Or even having a dedicated workspace so you only associate that area with work.
It's about creating those clear associations between our environment and the habits we want to build.
And this is where the second law comes in, make it attractive. This is all about the craving part of the habit loop.
And Clear explains that our cravings are actually linked to the desire to change our internal state, not necessarily the habit itself.
Right, like you don't crave smoking a cigarette, you crave the feeling of relaxation or stress relief that it gives you.
Exactly. And a key player in all of this is dopamine, the so-called motivation molecule.
Our brains release dopamine not only when we experience something pleasurable, but also in anticipation of it.
So we're actually motivated by the anticipation of that reward.
And one way to make good habits more attractive is using what Clear calls temptation bundling,
This is basically linking an action you want to do with an action you need to do.
like only letting yourself watch your favorite TV show while you're on the treadmill.
I've heard of people doing that.
It's a clever way to harness your existing desires.
Our social environment also plays a huge role in what we find attractive,
They're heavily influenced by the habits of the people around us.
especially the people we're close to the broader social norms and the people we admire.
If the people you spend the most time with value healthy eating, you're more likely to eat healthy yourself.
Exactly. And if you see someone you look up to meditating every day, you might be more likely to try it yourself.
It's about surrounding yourself with people who embody the habits you want to build.
And at the end of the day, the attractiveness of a habit really comes down to our feelings and emotions.
If we associate a habit with positive feelings, we're more likely to do it.
So Clear suggests reframing our thinking about habits. Instead of saying, I have to, try saying, I get to.
It's a subtle shift, but it can make a big difference.
All right, let's move on to the third law, make it easy. This is all about making the habit as simple and effortless as possible.
And Clear makes a really important distinction between motion and action.
Motion is all about planning and researching and strategizing.
But it doesn't actually produce a result.
Action is the behavior that actually leads to the outcome you want.
So you can spend all day researching different workout routines.
But if you don't actually exercise, you're not going to get any fitter.
It's about taking that first step and actually doing the thing.
And when it comes to building habits, repetition is key, not perfection.
It's about doing the habit consistently, even if you don't do it perfectly every time.
Clear talks about this neuroscience principle called long-term potentiation.
Which basically means that the more you repeat a behavior, the stronger the neural pathways in your brain become.
It's like creating a well-worn path in your brain for that habit.
And that makes it easier to do the habit automatically without even thinking about it.
And this is where the law of least effort comes in. Humans are naturally drawn to the easiest option,
So if you want to build a good habit, you have to make it as easy as possible.
like laying out your workout clothes the night before,
Or prepping your meals in advance.
or even just putting a book on your bedside table so you're more likely to read before bed.
It's about removing any obstacles that might prevent you from doing the habit.
And on the flip side, if you want to break a bad habit, you have to make it harder to do,
Like deleting social media apps from your phone.
or unsubscribing from tempting email lists.
It's about increasing the friction for those unwanted behaviors.
All right, let's move on to the fourth and final law. Make it satisfying. This is all about the reward, the thing that makes us want to repeat a behavior.
And our brains are wired to prioritize immediate gratification.
We want that reward right now,
And that can be a challenge when it comes to building good habits.
because the benefits of those habits often take time to show up.
Like eating healthy or exercising regularly.
But Clear says that we can hack our brains by finding ways to make those habits immediately satisfying,
Like giving yourself a small reward after completing a workout.
or tracking your progress so you can see how far you've come.
It's about creating that sense of accomplishment.
And one really powerful tool for making habits satisfying is habit tracking.
This is simply keeping a record of whether you did the habit or not.
It can be as simple as marking an X on a calendar.
But it makes your progress visible, which can be really motivating.
And it also holds you accountable.
Clear talks about Jerry Seinfeld's don't break the chain method, where he would mark an X on the calendar every day he wrote new material.
And his goal was to simply keep that chain of X's going.
It's a simple but effective way to stay consistent.
And lastly, Clear talks about the importance of accountability.
Having someone to check in with can make a big difference.
It can be a friend, a family member, or even a coach.
And you can even create a habit contract where you outline the consequences of not following through on your habit.
It adds that extra layer of motivation.
Now, Clear also touches on some more advanced tactics for those who want to go deeper.
Like the importance of choosing the right field of play.
This is about finding activities and habits that align with your natural strengths and talents.
It's about playing to your strengths,
And another advanced concept is the Goldilocks rule.
which says that we're most motivated when we're working on tasks that are just challenging enough.
Not too easy, not too hard, but just right.
It's about finding that sweet spot where we can get into a state of flow.
Clear also cautions against the dangers of complacency.
Once a habit becomes automatic, we can start to get bored and our progress can stall.
So it's important to keep challenging ourselves and finding ways to improve.
And one way to do that is through regular reflection and review.
Take some time to assess your habits, see what's working and what's not.
and adjust as needed.
It's about constantly learning and growing.
So to wrap all of this up for you, remember that small, consistent habits really do add up to extraordinary results.
It's about focusing on the process, not just the outcome.
And using the 4 laws of behavior change to make those habits obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying.
And remember, even though those first steps might seem small, they can have a huge impact over time.
So think about one small change you can make in your environment today that would make a desired habit just a little bit easier. And on the flip side, what's one small thing you can do to make an unwanted habit just a little bit harder? Start experimenting and see what happens.
Small changes lead to big results.
That's it for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.